there. Welcome to the CMMC Compliance Guide Podcast. I'm Stacey.
And I'm Brooke.
From Justice IT Consulting, where we help businesses like yours navigate CMMC and NIST 800-171 compliance. We're hired guns getting companies fast-tracked to compliance, but today we're here to give you all those secrets for free. So if you want to tackle it yourself, you're equipped to do so. Let's dive into today's episode and keep your business on track. Today we're talking FedRAMP. If you're relying on cloud services for compliance, understanding the differences between FedRAMP authorization and equivalency is crucial. It can impact timelines, costs, and the level of effort required during your CMMC assessment. So, Brooke, can you tell us what is FedRAMP?
Sure. FedRAMP is a Federal Risk Authorization Management Program, FedRAMP. So there's different levels of it, but it's basically a set of standards for cloud service providers like Microsoft, Google, Amazon, a ton of others. It's a framework for them for some stringent security standards for them to follow to make sure federal agency data is kept safe. And specifically, really, for us, dealing with the DoD, with CMMC, it's a place where we can rest assured that COI and SPD is COI is controlled unclassified information, and SPD is security protection data, where that stuff can be stored safely.
Can you tell us what the key characteristics are for FedRAMP authorization?
Sure. So FedRAMP FedRAMP authorization is really ATO, an authorization to operate. So the government gives you authorization to operate and sell your services to federal agencies. In this case, the DoD. So this has to be a sponsoring agency, like the DoD in this case, that sponsors a company, a cloud service provider, to go through the FedRAMP process. It's also considered a more permanent solution than FedRAMP Equivalency, which is what we're kind of comparing it to, because it can be reused across other agencies. Once you're on the FedRAMP Marketplace, you're on the FedRAMP Marketplace. There is a continuous monitoring portion of it and other things, but it's as opposed to equivalency, you're on the FedRAMP Marketplace, and they can basically shop with you. So it also helps out with assessments, which may be the next question, I think.
Yes. So really what we're looking for is, what does the process look like for FedRAMP authorization? What would that look like for our listeners who are seeking that?
So really, I mean, high level, the process is there's a sponsoring agency, in this case, the DoD, that has to sponsor you to be able to go through it. So if there's not a federal agency that wants your product, you're just kind of out of luck. But they can, one of them can sponsor you. You go through a readiness assessment. You engage with a 3PAO, not a C3PAO. Same concept, except C3PAO is CMMC third-party assessment organization. This is just a third-party assessment organization, so it's a 3PAO. They do the assessment, they generate their documents, and the reports, and then the sponsoring agency approves you or not. But anyway, the sponsoring agency approves you after that.
Are there any advantages to FedRAMP authorization?
There are advantages other than being able to be resold across federal agencies. That's of course one. You can have other agencies can go through the process and use you for their services as well. But the one big advantage as far as CMMC goes is that it effectively cuts. That may be a bad word to use, but it effectively lowers the amount of hours used to do the assessment when you compare to FedRAMP Equivalency versus FedRAMP Authorized. So if you have Authorized, you say, here's my authorization, and we're good to go. So that's about as far as they need to check into it at that point. That's as far as the assessor needs to check into it at that point.
Can you tell us how working with FedRAMP Authorized Services simplifies the CMMC assessment process for businesses?
Yeah, I can, and actually, I think I probably just spilled the beans there in the previous answer. But so yes, the during a CMMC assessment, a certification assessment, if you have a FedRAMP Authorized service as opposed to a FedRAMP equivalent service, like I said, it's you basically show them the the FedRAMP authorization, and they verify that, and they're good to go. If it's equivalency, then they have to go through the whole body of evidence. So it's a lot quicker there.
You had mentioned FedRAMP equivalency a couple of times. Could you go into the key characteristics of FedRAMP equivalency?
Sure. So FedRAMP equivalency is it's basically it's a snapshot of a cloud service provider being FedRAMP equivalent. So, but that's not. They don't go through the same process, and it's still rigorous. And the way the DoD defines it as FedRAMP official, I guess, FedRAMP equivalency, then they have to go through the same process using a 3PAO. And they have to come in and assess the organization. They have to still generate the documents, but they don't go through the rest of the process of the DoD, then going through all that, reviewing everything, and then approving it. But you get those documents. You get your anyway. You get that equivalency, and then you can use that equivalency. However, in the CMMC process, you still as I mentioned a while ago, the assessors still have to go through all of that documentation of the body of evidence and customer responsibility matrix and all that, of course, but to verify that product, that cloud service offering is still valid, still equivalent.
Is there a specific process that our listeners need to be aware of when it comes to FedRAMP equivalency?
Sure. So the process I kind of went over, but the 3PAO has to do their due diligence and make sure that you cover all controls and that there's no POAM items. But they have to generate their security assessment plan, security assessment report, and all that is very time intensive with a 3PAO. So neither the authorization process or the equivalency process is cheap or easy, I can tell you that. but yes, there's they start with that 3PAO and go through that process and generate the security assessment plan and security assessment report.
Are there any challenges when it comes to FedRAMP equivalency?
Yes, as far as CMMC goes, again, I've already said this, but I'll say it again, it's worth saying. With equivalency, each time, when you're assessed, when you get a certification assessment, the assessor has to go through the body of evidence and has to go through all that in the security assessment report, security assessment plan, and their body of evidence, and figure out if they're still FedRAMP equivalent or not. They have to go through all that, as opposed to the FedRAMP authorization, where you say, here's the authorization right here, and they say, okay, that cloud service offering is good.
Is there anything else businesses should keep in mind when it comes to using FedRAMP equivalent services during their CMMC assessment?
Yeah, really, it's just the time involved in using a FedRAMP. When you use FedRAMP equivalency cloud service offering, then the time involved in doing the assessment is going to be greater than one where there's not where it's FedRAMP authorized.
You've mentioned now FedRAMP authorization and equivalency. Can you give us the key characteristic differences of FedRAMP authorization versus equivalency?
Yeah, sure. So FedRAMP authorization is a more permanent solution. It requires a sponsoring agency, and you're good after that. There's other things that go into it. It's very high level, but you're good after that. And equivalency is, like I said, it's a point in time assessment, and it requires a lot more time on the assessor's part to review the FedRAMP equivalent service cloud service offering that you may be using.
Are there any significant impacts on businesses that do get certified?
The FedRAMP Authorized, again, really just it's going to take less time. FedRAMP Equivalency, whatever cloud service offerings you may have, and if you have 2 or 3 that are equivalent and not just one, it's going to take more time to go through those and assess those for the assessor. So that means more time, more money for you and the assessor, of course. You can always run into getting the body of evidence and getting all the documentation. You've got to do that well in advance because it is not always very easy to get that from the vendor. If you're getting it from Microsoft, you can get it. It very well may not be very quick at all. But there's that. There's time everywhere with equivalency, and with FedRAMP Authorized, it's just a whole lot easier.
When should you use FedRAMP Authorized versus FedRAMP Equivalent services?
Well, really, as far as when you should use one over the other, I would say you should, if at all possible, you should use FedRAMP Authorized services. They'll make your life a whole lot easier, and there's less documentation to have to keep track of and gather from the vendors. FedRAMP Equivalency, if you just can't find what is in your budget or what quite fits your needs in the FedRAMP Marketplace, what's authorized for the DoD, then you can go FedRAMP Equivalency. But you just got to keep in mind that you're going to need that documentation, and that, like I said, it could be the 10th of never when you get that, or the 10th of almost never maybe when you get that documentation from companies like Microsoft, or I guess it's possible the assessor may want more paperwork than was provided, but it's FedRAMP Equivalency can be used and can be done, but it's a lot more time intensive. So if you can, it's always best to use FedRAMP Authorized.
What should companies do to plan ahead when it comes to choosing FedRAMP Authorized versus equivalent services?
Really just engage that CSP early. Figure out if they're FedRAMP Authorized or FedRAMP I can't speak today, FedRAMP Equivalent. If they're neither, it's a no-go if it's COI or SPD. But figure out if they're either authorized or equivalent, and then if they're equivalent, you'll either have to sign a NDA, or you probably have to sign an NDA, but it'll be a process to get that paperwork because they don't just want to turn it over to anybody. So going through that FedRAMP Equivalency, a company that's FedRAMP equivalent. You just got to start early and make sure you have that paperwork as soon as possible.
Well, that wraps up our episode on FedRAMP Authorization and FedRAMP Equivalency. If you have any questions about what we covered today, please feel free to reach out to us. We're here to help and fast track your compliance journey. So please, please, please text, email, or call in your questions. We will answer them for free here on the podcast. You can find our contact information at CMMCComplianceGuide.com. Stay tuned for our next episode. Until then, stay compliant and stay secure.